Welcome into Hoosier Gameday. My name's Jack Edwards, riding it solo for week 7 of the Indiana football season. We've been through half of the campaign. Indiana going 3-3 so far. They'll need another 3-3 stretch at the very minimum if they want to make it to a bowl game. We'll have all of the updates for this weekend's matchup against Maryland to come, as well as a recap from last weekend from Max Parker. Joining us on today's show will be Evan Gerike to discuss the Maryland side of things, and Keegan Nickoson of thehoosier.com to talk about IU. But before we get into this coming week, let's talk about last week, Indiana's tough defeat against Michigan from Max Parker.
Let's be honest, the expectations were not very high coming into today, with the Hoosiers coming off a loss to the worst team in the Big Ten and Michigan, top 5 in the nation. But the Hoosiers came ready to play and even entered the half tied, keeping fans glued to their seats.
Starting the fourth quarter, we were down 7, right where we wanted to be. I mean, if you would ask any of us coming into the game, down 7 going into the fourth, I think everyone on the team would tell you that we're going to win that game. So we just got to be better in the fourth quarter, second half in general. So
in the second half, Michigan found its rhythm. IU briefly got their momentum back courtesy of a big interception from Devon Matthews, but the offense could not get going. And the offensive line struggles plagued IU again as Bazelak was sacked 7 times and consecutive drives were stalled.
Obviously, the last 2 weeks, our offensive staff has not done a good job making those adjustments. I mean, the proof's in the pudding. We haven't scored points in the second half, so it is what it is. You can call it what you want, but those adjustments have to be made, and they have to be made in a way that allows us to be successful in the second half. And that hasn't happened the last 2 weeks, so that's something we have to be addressed, and that's on our offensive staff. It's their responsibility, but at the end of the day, I'm the head coach, so I got to make sure it happens.
And with 9:43 to go in the fourth quarter, the dagger, a touchdown to tight end Luke Schoonmaker, was all it took to finally take the wind out of Indiana's sails and send the fans heading to the exits.
The bottom line is that, as I told our players a few minutes ago, there's a lot of football ahead of us. We got a lot of great opportunities on our schedule. Every single week's a big opportunity for us, and we take it one at a time. And obviously, yes, our guys' mindset's critical, but it is every time you play in this league. You're going to have your ups and downs, and you got to find a way to fight through them. And I think this team has learned how to do that, but at the same time, we got to finish, because it's all about finishing.
After the loss to Nebraska, it was already starting to look like an uphill climb to bowl eligibility. And today, that climb only got steeper. For the Hoosier Network, I'm Max Parker.
Thank you, Max. You can follow Max Parker Sports for Indiana football coverage all season long with the Hoosier Network. Here with another Indiana football beat reporter. I'm here with Evan Gerike now of the Hoosier Network. Evan, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Having a good time this morning.
It's going to be a fun show here today. We're talking Maryland side of things to get things underway. Last week out, playing against Purdue, an interesting matchup, 31-29. They dropped that one. Failed 2-point conversion very late on. Your takeaways, kind of what you viewed from that defeat against the Boilermakers.
Yeah, they were really right in that game and maybe should have won it. They kind of shot themselves in the foot right at the end. They had that 2-point conversion attempt, and ineligible receiver downfield doesn't count. That's pretty much the game, and that's a real tough way to lose. And Purdue, of course, has been kind of a confusing team all season, kind of doing the same thing, using penalties to beat themselves against Syracuse and then coming out and playing a much better game against Maryland. Aiden O'Connell had a really good game. It's kind of hard to tell based on that where these teams are, but Maryland definitely seems like a team that's rapidly on the rise, and it has a lot to do with that high-scoring offense they have. And there was not a lot of defense in that game, but Maryland's using that offensive power to kind of keep things rolling. And they were really close, obviously. That's probably a game that they're going to tell you they think they should have won. And maybe they're going to come into Indiana looking at the in-state rival for Purdue, try to get back on track.
And so kind of looking at their more macro view on their Big Ten schedule, 1-2, another defeat against Michigan, kind of that one. When you do like the Team A versus Team B versus Team C comparisons, Michigan, they played Michigan a lot closer than Indiana did. Do you take a ton away from that, the comparison that can be made there?
Well, yeah, you go into the big house and you play a game like that. That's obviously a really big deal for a team like Maryland. Historically, Maryland is a lot like Indiana in that sense, where they just have not had any success against the big three of Ohio State, Penn State, and Michigan. They're 3-20, which is probably a better record than Indiana has had over the last 25 years. I think they only have those 2 wins against Michigan and Penn State in 2020. So Maryland is obviously, they're on a rise. That's still kind of the goal for them, is to start knocking off those teams. And they nearly got there. They lost by 7 against Michigan. And they had a chance using that offense to drive down the field and score. And Talia Tunga-Barloa threw an interception on the second play of a drive that could have been game-tying. Just really disappointing for head coach Mike Loxley, who talked about it after that game of, this is a team, they didn't go into the game thinking it was a Super Bowl, but they obviously really want to beat a team like that, and they just have not had any success. And even their wins have been games where, they beat Penn State in 2020 as well. Their wins against Michigan came in a down year for them. Their win against Penn State, their other win against Penn State came in a down year against them. They haven't beat Ohio State. They also have struggled against Indiana. They've been a team since coming to the Big Ten that has not had a lot of success. And now you're facing a down team in Indiana this year who obviously has not had the best season. And Maryland is looking really good. And, they beat Michigan State pretty handily. They won their other 3 games. They're 4-2. If they win this week, they beat Northwestern next week. They've already locked up a bowl bid before they really get to the tough part of their schedule with Ohio State and Penn State coming up. So Maryland's definitely got a lot to prove this weekend, and a lot of it starts with Taulia Tagovailoa.
And you mentioned Taulia Tagovailoa there. The threats that you imagine he will pose in the weekend's matchup.
Yeah, he's just a guy who can throw the ball as much as he wants, and against an Indiana secondary that has allowed some big plays, that's scary for the Hoosiers. He threw for a career high in yards against Indiana last year in that 38-35 win. He's got the weapons. They have some rushing game as well, but through the air is really kind of the way that they're trying to target other teams because he has so much talent. And you see it obviously with his brother, Tua, who's now with the Dolphins. But Taulia's got his own skill set at Maryland. He's a player that really has shown his ability. He's shown, 13 passing touchdowns to go along with the 13 rushing touchdowns they have. So he's been really good this year. And if he can kind of keep that up against Indiana, this is a team that's going to struggle to stop him.
You touched on Maryland's upcoming schedule a little bit. In terms of importance, you can almost compare it to Indiana as well a little bit in your answer, but how important is this game for Maryland in terms of getting a road win in this particular matchup this weekend?
Yeah, if you're Maryland, you should be looking at this game like, we got to come in here and we got to win it. And it really, if I'm being honest, it should be a game that they're expecting to win. Indiana, although they have done a little bit better at home, they're 3-1 with that loss to Michigan last week. They can easily come into Memorial Stadium and use that high-flying pass offense to kind of control the tempo of the game, control the game itself, and beat Indiana. And that's really what they have to do for a team that, like you said, this is a real big, important game for them to have a really good chance at getting that bowl bid. And I think this team's good enough, the rest of their 6 games, they can still pick up 2 wins, especially with Northwestern the week after. But having that bowl eligibility locked up before you even play the top teams on your schedule, that's a good indication of whether Maryland maybe has taken that step forward to the point where they're beating these good teams that they haven't in years past.
Well, we're going to break kind of the format we usually do. We'll get your prediction right now. What do you anticipate in this weekend's matchup?
Yeah, I keep trying to give Indiana's offense some credit every week, and it's kind of come back to bite me every week. I'm going to say Maryland's going to win this one pretty handily. I'm going to go 31-17.
31-17, Maryland. We'll have to wait for my prediction. Not that there's too much anticipation there because I might be the worst person at predicting games. I finally have broken my deadlock with Indiana's record themselves.
You predicted them to lose.
I predicted them to lose to Michigan, which the intelligence on me, it's quite astounding. Before we swing fully into the IU side of things, there's been an interesting performer for Indiana so far this year. For more on that, here's Kylee Corman.
Thanks, Jack. Today we're talking about Indiana running back Jalen Lucas. It's all about heart over height for the young running back. The 5'9" true freshman from Louisiana has given a lot of hope in regards to the future of Indiana football. Being one of the shorter guys on the field has made many people doubt Lucas's ability to play at an upper level, but his love and determination proves otherwise. At first, Lucas was committed to Tulane University, but when Coach Tom Allen first saw the dynamic and speedy player that Lucas is, he was not giving up. Coach Allen knew Lucas would be a key asset to the Indiana offense and was very persistent while recruiting him. Lucas flipped from Tulane to Indiana in December, and he was in Bloomington training with the team by January. Since then, veteran running backs Sean Shivers and Josh Henderson have been mentoring him, but they say he has adjusted easily to college play. While Lucas got his hands on the ball a few times in the Idaho game, his breakout moment came in the Nebraska game when he broke 2 tackles and ran for 34 yards, Indiana's longest play of the game. He also had 4 attempts in the Michigan game last weekend and an average of 11.3 yards, giving him a career average of 9.1 yards. Coach Allen says Hoosier fans should expect to see more of these explosive plays out of that young running back. Back to you, Jack.
Thanks so much, Kylee. Let's dig now all the way into the Indiana side of things. Joining me now, Keegan Nickoson of thehoosier.com. Keegan, how are you, my friend?
It's great to be here. I've been asked for like 3 straight weeks to come, and I'm finally on set, so this is amazing.
You're just indicating how many times you've big-timed me so far this year.
Exactly.
It's great. It's great to get you here finally to get some insight into Indiana side of things. Probably more negatives to discuss than positives at the moment.
Unfortunately, yes.
Let's dig into the big change this week, the offensive line. Let's start with just the play of it so far this year over the first half of the season. What have you seen from it that's led to kind of some of the struggles?
I think Matt Bedford's ACL injury early in the year was just really a big setback. A captain, a leader of the offensive line, just not able to go the rest of the season. And they've never really been able to recuperate from that. And it's been, in a word, pitiful, I would say. I'm really surprised that Connor Bazelak is still healthy, in all honesty. And he's kind of performed well in spite of how bad the offensive line has been. There's just times where there will be 4 or 5 defensive players just running straight at him, blowing through the line. So it's been pretty bad, but I'm looking for them to play kind of pressure-free this week with the new offensive line coach.
So yeah, with that change, the interesting quote that came out with the switch, Darren Hiller moving out, don't expect miracles. It's not exactly a great sign for the future. Yeah. What do you expect to change, if anything at all?
Yeah, it's not a great sign, but I kind of appreciate the brutal honesty because you can't just bring in 5 new offensive linemen. The change that I expect to happen is just a pressure-free game. And, they don't need to press like they have been for the last 2 years. They have a new coach. They can play under him. And they can just play with a little bit more swagger. It's been really bad. Why not just go out and play pressure-free and try to have a good game?
Looking kind of more on the offense in general, the offensive line has obviously plagued a lot of the issues that's kind of been with them. Is there anything you want to see improved in this matchup against Maryland, kind of drawing for that Michigan game?
Everything, I would say. I don't know if there's anything that they can really not improve. Just trying to play hard and trying to play with some swagger. It's been really bad, as I've said like 5 times, unfortunately. And they just have to go out and play free. That's all I'm looking for, really.
You mentioned the Matt Bedford ACL injury, kind of the fitness of the team elsewhere. What players do you think have been big losses? What players that are kind of on the peripheral of coming back potentially could make an impact for this team this weekend?
Well, obviously DJ Matthews coming back would be ginormous. Best offensive player that Indiana has. Getting him back and just opening up the offense a little bit more would be huge. And then Jalen Williams is also a game-time decision with Matthews. And then having that veteran defensive back in the defensive backfield will be absolutely huge. And like Evan mentioned, Talia Tagovailoa is a really dynamic player. And in order to beat such a high-powered Maryland offense, you have to shut down the quarterback. And having Jalen Williams back would be absolutely ginormous. So.
Asked Evan about how big this game was for Maryland. I'll ask you the same question on the Indiana side of things. If a bowl game is your goal for this season, you need to do 3-3 on the back end of your stretch like you did in the first half of the season. How much of a must-win is this game?
Every game that isn't against a high-powered opponent is a must-win. Because when you look down their schedule, there isn't a game that you go in confident that they're going to come out victorious. I would say Rutgers and East Rutherford would be the best chance of them winning. So Maryland only being 11.5-point favorites, a lot of Indiana fans look at that as kind of a narrow line, even though it's a pretty wide line for most fan bases. So this is a very important game. I think they can shut down some parts of Maryland's offense and try to come out with a victory. And then if the offensive line can play with some swagger, protect Connor Bazelak, and they can have kind of not the same offensive plan for the whole game, because it's very easy to make one adjustment and shut Indiana down offensively, I think they should be able to get in the end zone a few times.
Kind of a curveball question here, but it's fall break for students at Indiana University. Yeah. How much of a fan presence do you expect from the student side of things, and how much do you think that could impact the home atmosphere that we might see on Saturday?
Yeah, well, I think I saw Evan tweeted out this morning that they gave out some free tickets to students, and I think I actually got one too. So,
are you going to use it?
I'm going to be there, but I'm definitely not using that ticket. I think the student turnout's going to be okay. Especially for the first half like it always is. But if they can stay in the game, the students will stay as long as they have a chance to win. But with it being fall break, a lot of people going home, I think it's supposed to be pretty cold. Memorial Stadium isn't exactly an amazing environment to watch a game in. So I'm not expecting a huge turnout, but I think it'll be decent.
Let's get into your prediction for this matchup. What are you anticipating Indiana-Maryland this weekend?
I'm expecting a similar score to what Evan said, but I think it's not a great matchup for the Hoosiers, especially if Williams can't go. If they can force Tagovailoa to get the ball down the field, I think they'll have a chance because his deep ball isn't the greatest. But his mid to short accuracy ball is very, very good, and he can extend plays with his legs. So if they can get pressure on the quarterback, I think they'll have a chance. But the offensively for Indiana, that's where they have to have a more dynamic game plan because we saw against Michigan, they wanted to hit the running backs out of the backfield for short passes, for quick passes because the offensive line couldn't protect Bazelak. Harbaugh went in, made one adjustment, and said, we're not going to let the short passes happen. And then I think they had 62 yards of offense in the second half. So it's going to be telling. I think it's definitely an easier game than Michigan, so they'd have a better chance. But I'm going to say 31-14 Maryland.
So I think we had 31-17 from Evan, 31-14 from you. Of those like 14, 17, 21 intervals, I'll take the 21 interval. 31-21 Maryland takes that one. I agree with a lot of your logic there. I think it'll be a tough one for Indiana. I think it would be a huge confidence booster, injection of positivity.
Absolutely,
but to me, I agree with you. It's a little tough to see that one coming through. But Keegan, thank you very much for the
Thanks
time.
for having me, Jack.
Thank you to Evan for coming on and Kylee as well. That does it for Hoosier Game Day this week. We will see you next week.